Look around right now, the world may seem like a little bit of a scarier place than normal. Across the news media and the internet, we see warnings of tactical nukes everywhere. We hear politicians talking about how we're the closest to nuclear Armageddon since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we've seen a rising amount of tension on a global scale that, quite frankly, we haven't seen since the prelude to the World Wars. The big question on everybody's mind right now seems to be, how worried should I be about all this? To answer that question, there are some things that we need to consider. For starters, the most volatility in the world is currently centered around Eastern Europe, and it's something I've been following since it started earlier this year. Throughout the last year, we have seen an ever-growing conflict in Ukraine that, at least according to the media, could be inching towards an all-out continental war. Since day one of the conflict, the Kremlin has been blunt in their intentions of seizing what territory they feel was theirs to start with, and hasn't been shy about saying they will use nuclear weapons in a situation where their military doctrine calls for it. Further adding to this conflict is the wide-scale NATO support that has been providing weapons and materials to Ukraine, which has resulted in large-scale sanctions going in both directions between Russia and the rest of Europe. While these sanctions were meant to deter Russia, we have seen them have the opposite effect. In response to these sanctions, Russia stopped exporting oil and, more vitally, natural gas to most European countries. Without the fuel from Russia, many Europeans have been struggling to heat their homes, and we have seen people threatened with as much as prison time for setting their thermostats above certain temperatures in some countries. Further worsening this European energy crisis is what appeared to be a deliberate attack against the Nord Stream pipeline that previously carried natural gas from Russia to Germany. While the pipeline at the time of the attack was shut down, this attack did cause severe damage to it, and means even if a peace settlement was able to be reached right now today and sanctions were lifted, it would still be a matter of months, if not even years, before gas could start flowing back into Europe from Russia at the same rate it did before this conflict in Ukraine started. Most recently in this conflict, we've seen Russia claim they've officially annexed several regions of Ukraine. These annexations were followed shortly by relatively large defeats of Russian forces who lost parts of the territories that Russia claims to have annexed. We have even seen during the most recent offensive an attack on the bridge connecting the occupied territories of Crimea to the Russian mainland that significantly damaged it and crippled its supply lines. While only time will tell for sure, many think that this could be the final straw that breaks the camel's back and ends up pushing Russia to the next level. My conclusion is that as I watch this all unfold from my perspective as an American, I don't personally have much concern for myself, at least. As much as Russia has made threats about the use of nuclear weapons, and I'll say it is a possibility, I don't see it as being probable that they'll actually be used. I don't feel Putin is deranged or unstable as an individual, and many people do seem to think that. He's making choices that he feels would be beneficial in the long term for him and his country, and starting a nuclear war would go against that. From what I've gathered about Putin, I think his main goal is to reunite the lands he believes are Russian lands, creating a legacy for himself in Russian history and preventing NATO's eastward expansion, and using nukes, quite frankly, would have the opposite effect of that, and it just doesn't make sense. If I was watching this as a European, however, I would bank on this combination of events that we're discussing, leading to further disruptions in your daily lives for the foreseeable future, especially when it comes to your energy needs. While I will reiterate, I don't feel a nuclear attack is very likely. With the constant shelling and fighting we've seen occurring around nuclear power plants in Ukraine, a nuclear accident, though, does seem to be relatively possible, and it's an event that would be much more likely to actually see happen. Overall, I personally feel Russia is intending to use the cold winter months as leverage to push other European countries away from supporting Ukraine. As much as these European nations claim they'll stick with Ukraine thick and thin, I think that the coming winter will change minds when countries have to choose between backing Ukraine or letting their own citizens freeze to death due to a lack of energy. This at least has been my opinion on the situation. Essentially, if you're an American watching this, it's relatively safe just to keep up with your normal preps, versus if you're a European, you should be preparing to face potential power outages and energy gaps during the coming winter, or even for the possibility of potential nuclear accidents. Please feel free to share this with your thoughts down in the comments below. After all, we are just going off our best read on the situation, and it is a very fluid situation at that. If you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button to help out the channel. And most of all, we want to tell everybody out there, stay safe and stay prepared.